Yeah, we can see that. There is
So
stability.
am I audible? So should I start, sir?
Yeah, you can start, sir.
Uh,
Stage is yours.
Sir, good evening, everybody. And my topic is on perfusion weighted dynamic susceptibility contrast MR imaging. It might sound complicated, but I would be just touching the basics. How do we go about it? And it is an integral part of characterization of any intracranial lesion. So I would be discussing very basic physics, stressing upon methodology, how do we do it, and then most important, how do we interpret it, and in the last few examples, what are its applications, how do it helps us. uh, so introductions of blood flow to the brain is known as cerebral perfusion, but for our as a radiologist in MRI literature, for us cerebral perfusion is measured by certain hemodynamic parameters like cerebral blood volume, cerebral blood flow, and mean transit time. So wholly and solely, we are just interested in how do we obtain these three parameters so that they can be used and applied for our help in the intracranial lesions. Just a definition, what is cerebral blood volume? It refers to volume of blood in a given region of brain tissue measured in ml per 100 gram of brain tissue. Blood flow is volume of blood per unit time which is passing through that 100 grams of brain tissue. And mean transit time is nothing but time and average time it takes blood to pass through a given volume of interest or region of interest. These are just the academic definitions. We should know that what is CBV, it is just a volume, flow is the blood passing through that 100 grams, mean transit time is the average time it takes to pass through a given region of interest or volume of interest. Now, just introduction about the potential applications, I cannot cover that in one slide. Obviously, evaluation of tissue at risk after acute stroke is a very important application. For me, most important for this talk is, can we differentiate a benign lesion from a malignant lesion? If we have done that, can we have an histological assessment that can we grade, is it a low grade tumor, grade 2 tumor, grade 3, grade 4, especially in cases of gliomas. And further stereotactic surgeries are very common these days. You can actually guide the clinician that yes, go there, that is the highest grade of the tumor. You can just go and hit that area and you can have a assessment of the highest grade of the tumor which is there, which is really decides the treatment of the patient. Recently, evaluation of neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's disease, and second most important indication for us is assessment of therapeutic interventions. Like we have given some treatment to that brain tumor patient. Now, how is he responding to it? Do we need to step up? Can we just follow it up? That's a very important decision making as the survival of these patients is increasing day by day with recent developments. Now, how do we obtain these three parameters? It's very basic thing is we need to just follow some tracer or some metabolite or some drug. We need to just study kinetics of that drug. That drug can be exogenously administered, or you can just label an endogenous metabolite or an endogenous atom and just study its kinetics. With exogenous tracer studies, we have two. DSC MRI, I am going to discuss in details. DC MRI is T1 weighted. I'm not going to discuss because it's out of the scope of this discussion. And very promising is arterial spin labeling, in which actually we use our blood as a tracer and we study the kinetics. Now, I need your attention into few of these slides because the physics is really important and I have tried to make it very simple so that anybody can understand that. Now, the dynamic susceptibility imaging takes advantage that whenever a paramagnetic tracer or a paramagnetic substance passes through a magnetic field and we are using a T2 star weighted imaging sequence, there is drop in signal. For radiologists, for technicians, everybody know we use a susceptibility weighted imaging. Whenever there is a paramagnetic substance, we get what we call blooming. Blooming is nothing but when a paramagnetic substance interacts with a magnetic field, there is drop in signal. That is known as blooming. So here we are on a same principle that in a T2 star weighted imaging sequence, we study signal versus time curve. Very important is how signal changes over time in a given region of interest as paramagnetic substance passes through that region of interest. Let's say this is a figure which excellently depicts that. Let us suppose this is the region of interest we are interested in. We have injected some paramagnetic substance that when it comes here, initially there will be a certain baseline signal intensity. We have injected a paramagnetic substance like gadolinium in our case. Then there will be drop in signal. There will be a sharp drop in signal. Then when the contrast goes away, then there will be recovery of that signal. This is very basic. Everybody knows this. Now what we are doing this? Can we use this information for obtaining our CBV, CBF and MTT? Yes, we can do. How can we do? We'll just see that. We can convert that signal intensity change into concentration time course. That means by applying a mathematical equation, that signal intensity change is giving us concentration of that tracer in that volume of interest. This is entirely mathematical. We just need to know, yes, we have an equation which changes signal intensity change into concentration of that tracer in a volume of interest. This parameter is required. So we have got CT, concentration in a given time in that volume of interest from signal intensity change. So signal time course data can be converted to tracer tissue concentration. So concentration of that contrast in that volume of interest we are obtaining indirectly from degree of signal intensity change. That is the only purpose of this slide. Before going ahead, we should know volume of interest or region of interest are same things. CT is concentration of tracer at time t in volume of interest we have just obtained from the last equation. Very, very important thing is arterial input function. Arterial input function, it sounds.
No, your voice is properly clear, sir. Maybe there's some network error from his side.
So arterial input function, it can sound technically something difficult, but it is not difficult. It is actually, we are measuring a tracer or contrast agent in a feeding vessel, which is a major vessel supplying that region of interest. For example, I have a lesion in right parieto-temporal location, and MCA is a major artery which is supplying that region. So computerized algorithms will give me this. AIF, I place a ROI on MCA, computer will calculate AIF from that. So when I have obtained CT, when I have obtained computerized algorithms give me AIF, now I am in position that I deconvolute or use some mathematical algorithms and I obtain CBV, CBF and MTT. Now everybody thinks why you are stressing on AIF? Because AIF is the major determinant of quality of DSC or maps you are getting. You are getting actually the data which you are going to assess anyways. AIF is the most important determinant of that. We'll see in further slides. So just remember there is one term AIF, arterial input function. Diagrammatically, this is region of interest you are interested in. Let us say this is an area of tumor under an ROI. The red dots represent CT, the concentration of contrast at given time, which we have obtained from the last equation of signal intensity change. And AIF is nothing but concentration of contrast to that VOI, which is from a major feeding vessel to that region, like MCA. So this is computerized. This we have obtained computerized from the last equation. So we are not calculating manually, but we need to know these two factors play major role. Now, how do we do it? This is just to show how we obtain AIF. We just place on MCA and ROI, and in that, with the time, the concentration of contrast increases as we inject the bolus. Contrast comes here, it increases, it goes away. Now, this value is given to us by computer, but this value is very important determinant of further how do we obtain our CBV and CBF maps. Even if you haven't understand even 1% of physics, it's okay. There is no need to understand this physics. Just summary is, whenever a contrast goes through a paramagnetic field, a magnetic field, there is drop-in signal. With an equation, that drop-in signal is converted into concentration of that contrast, and area under that concentration gives us CBV. So CBV is very simple to obtain. However, that thing arterial input function from a major vessel is required to obtain CBF and MTT. Now, why I am stressing on AIF. AIF, though calculated by a computer, but it depends on so many factors. For example, somebody might be having a cardiac output of 30, and somebody might be having a cardiac output of 50, and somebody might be having cardiac output of 60. And somebody might have stenosis at the level of carotid bulbs. Somebody might not have any stenosis. So amount of concentration of contrast that is reaching MCA varies from subject to subject. And it also depends how much contrast you are giving, what is the rate of the injection. So it might even differ in a same subject in different examinations. So that is why AIF is so variable. But recently vendors are behind AIF like anything. They're trying to make the software so that this AIF variability can be taken care of. But still now, AIF is really difficult to reproduce in any examination. So we should keep this aspect in mind. So knowing these things, now when we obtain CBV, CBF maps, we will get some mathematical value there, like 110, 100. When we place an ROI on tumor, you will get some mathematical value there. Now, can we use values obtained as absolute values, that I am obtaining like 130? Can that value can be used as such, or there is problem to it? There is problem to it, because we have already discussed the parameters are dependent on so many things. Bolus injection, amount of contrast being given, injection rate. These are not standardized things. They vary from institute to institute. In addition, AIF depends on cardiac output, vascular stenosis, everything. So we cannot compare these values with one another directly, which we are obtaining on those maps. So what we do, there is simple solution to it. Although absolute quantification is very difficult. People are trying it, but still it is very difficult. So what we do is, we take a value in a region of interest, we divide that value via contralateral gray or white matter, and we get a ratio. We get a ratio like 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 2, 3, 2.5. That ratio takes care of all the variability and confounding factors. So we don't need the absolute values, we need the ratios. So with the ratios, the studies can be compared in different subjects or within the same subject at different point of time. Now let's come to the most important part. How do we do it? It is very easy if you have an injector at your disposal, but due to limitation of resources, everybody doesn't have an injector. If you have an injector, you just give 0.1 millimole per kg of contrast agent. You should have a flow rate of 3 to 5 ml per second, and you get a beautiful studies. But the question is, sir, we don't have an injector. So what we do? If pressure injectors are not available, you use an 18 gauge cannula. A manual injection can be given if you are trained enough to inject at least 10 ml of contrast within 3 or 4 seconds, followed by flush of normal saline. This method will give you absolutely adequate CBV and CBF maps. So don't worry, if you don't have injectors, please start doing perfusion without injectors. There is no need. If you have, it's very good. Now, once we have injected the contrast, we know 10 ml. Some institutes inject 20 ml. So there is variability on this, but in our institute, we inject 10 ml of contrast with such a flow rate. Now, since contrast passes like within few seconds from a volume of interest, it is very fast passage. So what we need? We need something which has a very high resolution, very high temporal imaging. So we need sequences which are ecoplanar imaging sequences. Those are really fast, means those are acquiring a same region again and again and again and again in a pattern. So repeated rapid cine imaging of volume of interest is very important in ROI. So what we do is in our institute protocol, we have 60 phases which we get in 102 seconds. The first 6-7 phases we don't inject contrast, we inject contrast only 7th or 8th phase. Each phase acquires approximately 20 images covering the whole brain. So we have 60 into 20, 1200 images as a raw data. That is raw data. Slice thickness is 4 mm, TR is 1600, T is 30. Vendors, actually this is vendor dependent. So now what is this? This is actually what we get as in raw data. I have put this slide because I wanted to show these upper rows show the images before we have injected the data. You can actually see these are bright images. Now, as the contrast has started to flow in, the contrast has come to vessels, there is generalized drop in signal. Now, as the contrast washes away from the brain parenchyma, again we are regaining the signal. So this is the raw data. This is just for your understanding that on your console you will get something like this. This is raw data. We are not going to analyze the raw data. So what we are going to do actually, there are so many different post-processing softwares are available, and they are available everywhere where we have MRI machines. 1.5 Tesla, 3 Tesla, both are good enough for this. So we put our raw data on those softwares and they give us RCBV, RCBF. Please make a note that R is relative here because I have already mentioned absolute values we don't get because so many variabilities are there. So we get RCBF, RCBV and MTT maps and we put AIF. This is again a computerized thing, but AIF is so important. We put an AIF and then what we get is something like this. So we are getting a relative CBF, a relative CBV. This is TTP due to, I don't know, I haven't taken MTT image here, but for us, most important are CBF and CBV. So after injecting the contrast, acquiring the images, post-processing, which is very 2-3 step process, we get something like these maps. Now we have injected the contrast, we have processed the data. Now, how do we interpret it? That is the most important part. Now what we do is, you can easily see these are our basic morphological sequences. I think this is diffusion or flare. This is diffusion, I think. You can see there's a difference in resolution, SNR, signal to noise ratio. These, in simple words, these images are so clear. These are not so clear. So what can we do about it? There is very simple way. We overlap these maps with T1 weighted images of similar thickness. DSC maps are then overlapped with post-contrast T1 weighted images for accurate localization of first the disease process, then areas of enhancement in that, and so that we can avoid cyst, necrosis, calcification, hemorrhage, and any large vessel coursing through that. So that's how I do it. Actually, these are not two different images. Actually, we superimpose T1 post-contrast with CBF or CBV map. For actually technical reasons, so that it is easy to understand, I am showing them as different images. Otherwise, they are superimposed images. So when I slide my cursor to right side, I get T1 weighted images on that image. When I slide down my cursor towards left side, I got perfusion maps on same image. So then what is the use? Use is I nicely localize my tumor here. I nicely localize what I want to see. So I put an ROI here, copy that ROI, paste that ROI when I go on the perfusion map, paste it on that. So I am very sure, even SNR is not good, but I'm very sure where I am taking my values. So it is very, very, very important to have overlap T1 post-contrast images of similar thickness to CBV and CBF maps. Now we have done the overlapping thing, we have injected the contrast, we have post-processed it, we have done the overlapping thing. Now the most important thing comes, how do we quantitatively assess it? There is one way to just qualitatively assess it. Yes, the color coding. Now one point about color coding is the bluish color, greenish color, red color. The red color is the most perfused color, followed by the greenish thing, followed by the bluish thing. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that previously. So since now we have CBV, CBF maps, we have overlapped them. Now how do we quantitatively analyze them? That's the most important thing. What I use is I usually use ROI of maybe 2 to 5 or 4 to 7 millimeter squares. I put, as I have already mentioned, I have to take normalized ratio. What I do is I take an area of interest in tumor. I divide that area with contralateral gray matter or white matter so that I get some ratio. That ratio is like 1, 1.5, 2, 3. That is good enough for me. I don't want other values. That ratio takes care of all the confounding factors which we have already mentioned. This is how I do the normalization. I select the my area on the lesion. I put an ROI there. I get some mean value like 377. Then I put a on a contralateral gray matter. I put an ROI. I get a value like 275. This by this gives me ratio. Similarly, I can use white matter as my reference range, like white matter. You can divide this value by white matter, and then you can. Similarly, I've copied these on my perfusion maps. I've already told you these are same images, but for the purpose of convenience, I have shown them as different images. Now the question automatically comes to someone's mind, sir, should we use gray matter as a reference range or should we use white matter? Interestingly, historically, people for first 10-15 years were only using white matter. But I have done two studies in last 3 years. We have used gray matter. Now, why gray matter is preferred over white matter is because white matter has certain limitations. Somebody might use periventricular white matter. Somebody might use deep white matter. Somebody might use subcortical white matter. As we go from periventricular to subcortical, there is a lot of difference in perfusion of brain. So you cannot standardize your values, and you cannot compare with old studies because somebody might have used just a deep, somebody might have used the subcortical. Another problem is if the patient has so many chronic ischemic changes, then perfusion is altered. So white matter is so much affected by chronic ischemic changes. Another observation which literature has shown is significant high water content in contralateral hemisphere in the case of tumors. So that again hampers, and gray matter gives rarely constant values. So I prefer gray matter. I have preferred gray matter in my routine practice, in my all the previous studies, and that really gives us beautiful values, which are we very confident upon. So now the application part comes. Now you will say, sir, we have superimposed, we have taken the ratios. Now how do these ratios, what these ratios tell us? Now I'll tell you, now let's discuss what I see in gliomas. Normalized values in gliomas. In gliomas with gray matter as reference range, we have done two studies. One was done in our institute in 2017, one was done in 2019. One has already been published, other is underway. So I haven't given references for that. I can give you afterwards. The normalized values with gray matter reference range we obtained in gliomas as 1.66, the ratio. But the problem in that study was we just had 8 tumors and most of them were intermediate to low grade tumors. So, and then we did another study in 2019, we had a large sample size. So we got 35 gliomas and most of them were high grade gliomas, and we got the ratios around 3.43 with a range of 2.2. So what does I mean? I mean, now let's go to this example. Now this is a grade 4 glioma. This is proved glioma. These are superimposed images. What I have done is, this is thick walled ring enhancing lesion in the temporal region. This is corresponding map. Now I select an area which with an ROI of 3 approximately, I get a value of 660. I go to contralateral gray matter. I superimpose these two things because on these maps it's sometimes very difficult to localize the gray matter because of resolution. So I obtain the I take care of sulcal vessels. I don't have to go into the sulcal vessels because that will we will obtain wrong values. So obtaining the sulcal spaces, I go to gray matter. I have obtained a value of 108. So I take a ratio 660 by 108, the value comes 6.1. Now, I must tell you that our institutional experience is that in grade 4 gliomas, our values usually come like 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, usually above 3.5. Usually, when we normalize this to gray matter. If I take ROI here, the perfusion will be less. This value will be 7, 8, 9, 10. But I don't use white matter. So take home message is take grade 4 gliomas. They usually give values above 3.5, and that can be 3.5 till 6, 6.57, any value you can get. So this is the take home message. Now this is a grade 3 glioma. This was grade 3 astrocytoma, actually a very recent case with us. When I got the values, I did the calculations on my console. I got a value of 3.6. Okay, so grade 3 gliomas, it is very difficult to actually distinguish grade 3 gliomas from grade 4 gliomas. It's very difficult. It's very difficult, at least for me. But yes, again, you will get a ratio from somewhere 3, 3.5, 4. Yes, it might not be 6, 5.5 or 6. So I would say above 3, it's either grade 3 or grade 4 glioma. And if it is 5, 6, it's grade 4. And from 3 to 4, it might be anything. We need to take care of other morphological parameters also, like spectroscopy, choline peak, the diffusion section, the hemorrhage in the lesion, everything you have to take care of. I'm just discussing perfusion, so don't get carried away by just these values. Now this is grade 2 glioma which was operated. This is a FLAIR image showing nicely. There was not much enhancement to it. I got a value of 234, and in a normal gray matter the value was 114. So the value came out to be 2.03. So our experience with grade 2 gliomas is we usually get values around 1.5 to 2.2. So from 1.5 to 2, we get values in grade 2 gliomas. Nothing is absolute, exceptions are always there, but I am just giving you an idea of our experience. Now, this is low grade glioma. I'm sorry I was not able to take the FLAIR image, but here it was seen in left external capsule or the insular region. The value came out to be 75, 75, 159 in the contralateral gray matter, and value came to be 0.5. So low grade gliomas are really tricky. They are hypoperfused, even sometimes choline values don't help. So morphological characteristics in low grade gliomas are really helpful. And our experiences, we get somewhere from 0.5 to 1.5. This is our experience in our institute for low grade gliomas. So summarizing my things, grade 4 gliomas, more than 4, 5, 6. Grade 3, you cannot distinguish actually, somewhere near 3 to 4. Grade 2 gliomas, we have already discussed, around 2 to 2.5. And low grade gliomas 0.5 to 1.5. And these are actually 99 or 90% true. There are always exceptions to it. So we need to be very careful. We should have an adequate institutional experience because there is paucity of literature. And if even literature is giving us values, nobody knows where it was normalized. Was it normalized in white matter or gray matter? Where in gray matter it was normalized? So we should have our own data set for it. Now, another important set of interesting is meningiomas. Meningiomas are really perfused tumors. In a study in 2017, we had a good sample size. We got the values around 3.63. In 2019, sample size was 9. We got around 4.5. Now, I want to discuss with you people is meningiomas are really hyperperfused tumors. So see, this is a post-contrast T1. This is really red. I got 987 here. I got 215 here. This by this, I got 4.5. So I must say meningiomas, because they are morphologically not a problem with grade 4 gliomas, they have similar values. They can have values as high as 8, 9, 10. So meningioma, because they are not a diagnostic delma after all, but just for the sake of perfusion, I am showing you the meningiomas, which usually give values parallel to grade 4 gliomas or even higher than that because they are really hyperperfused. This is another example of atypical invasive meningioma. It was invading the brain. I am just showing you. It was invading the brain. It was a dual base lesion invading the brain parenchyma and only highly perfused. So one more thing I want to add is I usually pick the most perfused thing which I see on the perfusion map, avoiding the vessels. Or another way is you can just correlate with the lesion which is the area which is showing maximum restriction. You can also take that corresponding region on your perfusion maps. So here it was 447, 120 in the gray matter here. The ratio came out to be 3.7. So it is on the higher side. Let's go ahead. Now the most important and most troublesome thing for radiologists is metastasis. Unfortunately, we had a very low sample size in 2017 about metastasis, only 3 we had, and my average values came out to be 2.5 in 19, 2.72 with a good sample size. Now, the care for inward metastasis is they depend upon their organ of origin. So organ of origin actually determines what value you are going to get. If you are getting a metastasis from some very, very aggressive cancer like RCC, thyroid or breast, value is going to be really high. They can even cross grade 4 gliomas. But accept those if you get them from lungs or ovaries or somewhere. We have some pattern. I am going to discuss that pattern. Don't worry about it. So CA breast, this is a case of CA breast. Really, I've already told you, CA breast are really hypervascular. Most of these mets are very hypervascular. Exceptions are there. I got a value of 5.31. This is not a usual pattern which I see in metastasis. I must confirm that this is not a usual value I get. But what I get is I will discuss further on. Now, this is how a typical metastasis looks like. Gives us the values. This is a recent case, CA lung. I have obtained a value here, and 83, 169 value was approximately 2. So about if we leave certain exceptions like breast, thyroid, RCC, most of other metastasis, we have an experience that we get a value somewhere from 2 to 2.5. Maximum up to 3. They don't usually around 2.5, 2 to 2.5. This is an exception rather than a rule. This is again from CA breast. You can see but really high values were really high. So breast is always an exception, but this is again from CA lung in a cerebellum. You can see a 204, 79. Value came to be 2. This is the typical value which I get in metastasis. So if I summarize, I get from somewhere from 2.5 to 3 in my routine practice, because we are seeing a lot of cases. I cannot show you everything. We are doing approximately so many cases, maybe 15, 16 tumors within a week. So we really have a good data set for that. This is an ovarian metastasis, again a typical value around 2.5, so 2.37, 318, 134, so it was 2. So these are the typical metastasis values, 2.5, 2 to 2.5. Exceptions are always there like CA breast. Now we come to lymphomas. Really interesting. Lymphomas are really interesting. Actually, we are doing a lot of work on lymphomas. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of data in 2019 to show you from our study. We have just had a single case, but we are doing so many lymphomas day in day out that I have done at least 5 lymphomas in last week. So we have a good idea what we get in lymphomas. We get approximately a range of 1.2 to 2.5. It is usually on the lower side. You can say 1.2 to 2 is what I should tell you. Let's say this is an example. So near about 1.5 to 2 is my idea, which I get repeatedly in lymphomas. This is a recent case of lymphoma was operated, confirmed to be a lymphoma, typical morphological features of lymphoma, homogeneous enhancement, periventricular region, ROI was there, 277, 168, the ratio came out to be 1.35. So typical lymphoma range. Another typical lymphoma range are again around 1.46, homogeneous enhancement, periventricular location, and the perfusion values 191, 130, we get a ratio 1.46. Another lymphoma, it's the last one, so don't get bored. This is again enhancing periventricular peritrigonal white matter corpus, splenium of the corpus callosum involved. We get a ratio 1.73. So lymphomas give us values around 1.5, plus minus exceptions are always there. This is our institutional experience for this. I have done with my malignant things. I just added tuberculomas because they are really such lesions that sometimes you get stuck if it is a tuberculoma or if it is a ring enhancing GBM or if it is some metastasis. So I just a touch of tuberculomas. In study in 2019, we had just 2 cases, but in my experience, we have a lot. We are doing day and night tuberculomas also. We are doing perfusion in every intracranial SOL, irrespective of anything, so that we can have an idea also, we can help patient also, and we are maintaining our institutional data set under Dr. Kavita Sagar's guidance, and she's really helpful in allowing these things to us. So in our routine reporting, we usually hypoperfuse. They are usually hypoperfuse, that is 0.5 to 1.5. Usually this is not a normal typical value. They are usually lower than this. This is a ring enhancing lesion. This is corresponding lesion 110, 92, 1.3. But only exception which I will say in tuberculomas is when you are taking tuberculoma without starting the treatment, you will get hypoperfused values like 1, 1.2, 0.8, 0.9. But the exception is if you start. Oh, I somehow lost my control, Rahulji. I somehow lost my.
No. You can actually still click on the PPT. You go on the PPT. Your screen is already. You're already sharing your.
Okay. I do that. Is it visible?
Yeah. It's properly visible.
Sorry for the inconvenience. I am just going to finish in a second. Just about tuberculomas. In tuberculomas, if the ATT has just been started, you can say within 2 months, you can get really an inflammatory stage of tuberculomas. This is a paradoxical response to a treatment where you get values of 1.5, 2. So you need to have a history of tuberculoma that if the ATT has just been started in last 2 months only, then don't get disturbed by the aggressive looking perfusion findings in tuberculoma. Don't worry about it. You just follow it up. The values will come down around 1.8, 0.9. So only one exception in tuberculomas. Abscess is never a problem, but I just included it that if you have a central restriction, you obviously diagnose, but I wanted to show that if you void the adjacent vessels, the abscess has a hypovascular wall. These are just vessels around it, and you will get a value of very hypoperfused values. So abscess cannot confuse you. Now another question one might ask, sir, you are always talking about CBF. Should we use CBV or CBF? Both are available to us. Traditionally, CBV has been the most commonly used parameter. From literature, you will just find CBV. The problem is, as we have already seen, CBV is least dependent on AIF. However, due to recent developments in softwares in AIF, CBF is giving us reproducible data, which can easily be compared with in different studies, and it is at par with CBV. However, CBF has a very important role that if you want to monitor a post-treatment changes in a tumor, then CBF is important because you are providing some therapeutic agent which will go with blood flow. So CBF is important in those cases. So why not to take CBF at first place also? So that subsequently we can just see. But it is your wish. I am more interested. I have more experience of 5 to 6 years in CBF. So I go with CBF. Vendors have improved AIF like anything, so I'm okay with CBF. So since there is not yet an overabundance of published data for clinical decision making with use of perfusion parameters, the quantitative reporting requires an institutional experience. Now the last limitations. If the patient you cannot get contrast, if it is contraindicated, you cannot do this. Excessive motion will destroy your study. Areas of hemorrhage will produce lot of susceptibility artifact. But yes, you can go just away from them. Peripheral lesions near calvaria, you can actually study them. A little bit of problem is there. Overlap of values between benign and malignant. Yes, it is a problem, but it is only a problem if you only see CBF as such. But if you see all the morphological features, you see spectroscopy, you see the history, you see the morphological characteristics, there's no problem at all. And now the last thing is, my conclusion is, perfusion parameters have correlate very well with glioma grades. They are important deciding factor between benign and malignant etiology. Due to limited published data, the institutional experience is very important. Uniformity of results depends upon so many factors, AIF, but they have really improved over the time. Perfusion imaging has added an important functional aspect to the morphological assessment of various intracranial lesions. Thank you very much.
Very nice, sir. Thank you very much for the very insightful and very contentful session, because I could actually relate that how you and Dr. Sanchi have actually spent a lot of the time in preparing all those insights. And Dr. Devinder, your slides actually and the content actually is giving us a directions that how beautifully work you guys are doing in the premier institute like the Hero DMC under the able leadership of our respected Dr. Kavita. So maybe hats off to you all.
She's really helpful in everything. Whatever we do, we are doing with her guidance, and she's really helpful in this.
Yes, we all are proud of her. And without much to say, we'll invite Dr. Firoze Shaheen.
Sir, can you unshare my screen? Can you?
Yeah, you can actually click on that arrow, and that would be going unshare. Go to the Microsoft Teams and then click on the arrow button.
Okay, sir. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. So over to you, Dr. Firoze, maybe for your expert comments, because you hold a great experience in this field, and I'm sure the people would be love to hear from you, sir. Yeah, your mic is on mute, sir. Maybe you can unmute. Sorry.
Rahul, you'll have to unmute Dr. Firoze.
Okay. I have allowed that. So you can unmute now. Yeah.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah, it's perfectly audible, sir. Go ahead.
Excellent lectures. I think Dr. Sanchi has covered given an, as I said, a bird's eye view of MRI pelvis. But for the residents, I would say a word of caution that now it's not that the